Welcome to all devotees. Now today's Bhagavatam class. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrutam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirait नष्टप्रायेषु भद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तम श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिके. Hare Krishna Dandavat Pranam. Today, now we continuing Srimad Bhagwatam, Canto 11. We start new chapter, chapter 21, explanation of the Vedic path, from shloka number 1 to 4. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha ये एतान् मत्पतः हित्वा भक्ति ज्ञान क्रिया आत्मकान् क्षुद्रान् कामान् चलैः प्राणैः जुषन्त संसरन्ति ते स्वे स्वे अधिकारे यानिष्ठा सह गुणः परिकीर्तितः विपर्ययः तु दोषः स्यात् उभयोः एष निश्चयः. शुद्ध अशुद्धि विधि एते समानेषु अपि वस्तुषु द्रव्यस्य विचिकित्सा अर्थम गुण दोषौ शुभ अशुभौ धर्म अर्थम व्यवहार अर्थम यात्रा अर्थम इति च अनग दर्शित अयं मया आचारः धर्मम उद्भवतां दूरम. ट्रांसलेशन एंड परपट बाय द श्रीला प्रभुपाद. जगत गुरु श्रीला प्रभुपाद की जय. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, those who give up these methods of achieving me, which consist of devotional service, analytical philosophy, and regulated execution of prescribed duties, and instead being moved by the material senses, cultivate insignificant sense gratification, certainly undergo the continual cycle of material existence. Steadiness is in one's own position is declared to be actual piety, whereas deviation from one position is considered impiety. In this way, the two are definitely ascertained. Photo delete. Oh, sinless Uddhava, in order to understand what is proper in life, one must evaluate a given object within its particular category. Thus, in analyzing religious principles, one must consider purity and impurity. Similarly, in one's ordinary dealings, one must distinguish between good and bad. And to ensure one's physical survival, one must recognize that which is auspicious and inauspicious. I have revealed this way of life for those bearing the burden of mundane religious principles. Purport by the Srila Prabhupada, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki jai. As clearly explained by Lord Krishna in the previous chapter, philosophical analysis and also the performance of prescribed duties are ultimately meant for achieving Krishna consciousness or pure love of God. Devotional service based on hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord directly engages the conditioned soul in the Lord's loving service, and thus is the most efficient means of achieving the Lord. All three processes, however, share a common goal, Krishna consciousness. Now the Lord describes those who, being completely absorbed in material sense gratification, do not adopt any authorized means to achieve the Lord's mercy. Currently, hundreds of millions of unfortunate human beings fit squarely into this category and, as described here, perpetually suffer the bondage of material existence. In the previous verse, Lord Krishna explained that the path of spiritual progress begins with working without purity desires, advances to the stage of realized spiritual knowledge and culminate the direct engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. Here, the Lord emphasizes that a conditioned soul should not artificially disrupt the natural evolution of his Krishna consciousness by deviating from those duties prescribed by the Lord himself. In the lower stages of human life, one is entangled in false identification with the gross material body and desires to execute material fruitive activities based on society, friendship, and love. When such materialistic activities are offered in sacrifice to the Supreme Lord, one becomes situated in Karma Yoga. By regulated sacrifice, one gradually gives up the gross bodily concept of life and advance to the stage of realization of spiritual knowledge, whereby one understands oneself to be an eternal spirit soul completely different from the material. Photo delete, photo remove, feeling Hare Krishna. Last back, material body and mind. Next, feeling relief from the pangs of materialism, one becomes very attached to one's spiritual knowledge, and thus one is situated in the stage of Jnana Yoga. As the candidate further advances on the spiritual path, he understands himself to be part and parcel of the Supreme Soul, the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. He then sees that his conditional life as well as his spiritual knowledge was obtained from the personality of Godhead, who awards the results of all types of activities, both pious and sinful, by directly engaging in the loving service of the Supreme Lord and understanding oneself to be the Lord's eternal servant. One's attachment evolved into pure love of God. Thus, one first gives up the lower stage of attachment to the material body and then subsequently gives up attachment to cultivation of spiritual knowledge. Relieves one of material life. Finally, one recognizes the Lord Himself as the resting place of one's eternal love and fully surrender to God in full Krishna consciousness. Lord Krishna explained in this verse that one who is still attached to the material body and mind cannot artificially give up the prescribed duties of karma yoga. In the same way, one who is spiritual neophyte, just beginning to realize the illusion of material life, should not artificially try to think of the Lord's intimate past tense 24 hours a day, imitating the stage of Prema Bhakti. Rather, he should cultivate analytic knowledge of the material world by which one gives up attachment to the material body and mind. In Srimad Bhagwatam, we find many analytic descriptions of the material world, and they can free the conditioned soul from false identification with matter. One who has achieved the perfect stage of love of Godhead, however, being freed from all gross and subtle attachment to the material world, may give up the lower stages of Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga and engage directly in the Lord's loving service. In chapter 19, verse 45, Lord Krishna states Guna dosha drushi dosha gunaha tubhya varjita. One should not see material good and evil within a duty of the Lord. Indeed, one becomes pious by giving up such mundane conception. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out that occasionally a neophyte devotee may be polluted by association with those enthusiastically executing fruitive activities and mental speculation. Such a devotee's religious activities may be affected by mundane tendencies. Similarly, an ordinary person who observes the exalted status of a pure devotee sometimes externally imitates the devotee's activities, considering himself to be on the same exalted platform of pure devotional service. These perfect these imperfect practitioners of Bhakti Yoga are not exempt from criticism since their primitive activities, mental speculation, and false prestige are material intrusions in the pure living service of the Lord. A pure devotee engaged exclusively in the Lord's service should not be criticized, but a devotee whose devotional service is mixed with material qualities may be corrected so that he can rise to the platform of pure devotional service. Innocent person should not be misled by the mixed devotional service of those not engaged exclusively in the Bhakti Yoga system, but those unable to fully engage in Krishna consciousness should nevertheless not give up their regular prescribed duties, declaring them to be illusion. For example, one unable to fully engage in pure devotional consciousness should not give up his family, considering it an illusion. For by doing so, he will fall into illicit sex life. Material piety and analytic knowledge of the material world must therefore be cultivated until one comes to the stage of directly practicing Krishna consciousness. In religious activities, ordinary dealings, and personal survival, one cannot avoid value judgments. Morality and religion are perennial necessities in civilized society. Therefore, distinction between purity and impurity, piety and impiety, morality and immorality must somehow be ascertained. Similarly, in our ordinary worldly activities, we distinguish between palatable and tasteless food, good and bad business, high class and low class residences, good and bad friends, and so forth. And to ensure our physical health and survival, we must constantly distinguish between what is safe and unsafe, healthy and unhealthy, profitable and unprofitable. Even a learned person must constantly distinguish between good and bad within the material world, but at the same time, he must understand the transcendental position of Krishna consciousness, despite one's careful calculation of that which is materially healthy and unhealthy. The physical body will collapse and die. Despite careful scrutiny of the socially favorable and unfavorable, one's entire social milieu will vanish with the passing of time. In the same way, great religions arise and disappear in the course of history. Thus, mere religiosity, social and financial expertise for or physical fitness cannot award the actual perfection of life. There is a transcendental good beyond the relative good of the material world. Any and a person except the practical and immediate necessity of material discrimination. Yet one must come ultimately to the transcendental stage of Krishna consciousness, where life is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. Lord Krishna, in his elaborate teachings to Sri Uddhava, is gradually clarifying the transcendental position of Krishna consciousness beyond the endless variety of material good and evil. Ordinarily, religious principles prescribing innumerable rules and regulations and prohibition are undoubtedly a great burden for those bereft of Krishna consciousness. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagwatam 1.1.11, it is stated, Bhurini Bhuri Karmani Shrotavyani Vibhagasha. There are countless religious scriptures in the world prescribing countless religious duties. The authorized scriptures are those spoken by the Lord Himself or His representative as stated in this verse. In the last chapter of Bhagavad Gita, 18.66, Lord Krishna states, Sarva Dharman Prityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Raja. One should give up the troublesome burden of mundane piety and directly take to the loving service of the Lord, in which everything is simplified. Lord Krishna also states in Bhagavad Gita 9.2, Susukam Kartum Avyayam, the Bhakti Yoga process, which depends completely upon the mercy of the Lord, is very joyful and easily performed. Similarly, Lochan Das Thakur sings, परम करुणा प्रभु दुई जना निताई गौरम गौरचंद्र सब अवतार सार शिरोमणि केवल आनंद कंद. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is Lord Krishna himself, appeared 500 years ago to distribute the sublime method of chanting the holy name of the Lord. In this way, rather than bearing the burden of artificial austerity, one can directly take to the Lord's service, cleansing one's heart and immediately experiencing transcendental bliss. Those who have taken to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement follow for basic principle: no illicit sex, no eating of meat, fish or egg, no intoxication and no gambling. They rise early in the morning, chant Hare Krishna, and spend the daily happily engaged in the Lord's service. Those who follow the ritualistic karma kand section of the Veda, however, are burdened with innumerable regulations, rituals, and ceremonies which must be personally performed by the worshippers or performed on their behalf of qualified brahmanas. At any moment, there is danger or discrepancy resulting in the total loss of their accumulated piety. Similarly, those on the philosophical path must painstakingly define, refine, and adjust philosophical categories, a process that generally ends in confusion and helplessness. The practitioners of mystic yoga undergo grueling penances, subjecting themselves to serve heat and cold, near starvation, and so on. All such materialistic persons have personal desires to fulfill, whereas the devotees of the Lord who desire the Lord's pleasure simply depend upon the Lord's mercy and go back home, back to Godhead. In the previous verse, the Lord mentioned that in the material world there are endless distinction and value judgments to be made in the course of one's life. A devotee, however, sees Krishna within everything and everything within Krishna, remaining humble, simple, and blissful in the Lord's service. He does not perform elaborate religious ceremonies, nor does he become an antisocial or immoral. The devotees simply chants the holy name of Krishna and easily achieve the highest perfection of life. Ordinary person endure for bodily maintenance, but a devotee is automatically maintained by the Lord's mercy. A devotee's ordinary dealings and religious activities are also all dedicated to the personality of Godhead. Thus, there is nothing but Krishna in a devotee's life. Krishna gives all protection and maintenance, and the devotee gives everything to Krishna. This natural, liberated situation is called Krishna consciousness. It is the ultimate absolute good, as explained by the Lord throughout this canto. Thus end the purpose. Om Jnanatimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Ena Tasmai Sri Gurave Nama Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Ena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vande Am Sri Guru Sri Tapada Kamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavancha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam साद्वैतम सावधूतम परिजन सहितम कृष्ण चैतन्य देवम श्री राधा कृष्ण पादान सगण ललिता श्री विशाखान्वितांच नमो ओम विष्णु पादाय कृष्ण प्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्ति वेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देश तारिणे वांछा कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम Ram Ram Hare Hare. Hare Krishna Dandavat Pranam. Today we continuing Srimad Bhagwatam, Canto 11, Chapter New, 21, Explanation of the Vedic Plus. In this chapter, Lord Krishna explaining about the Vedic path to Uddhava. Here, mostly they given the importance of the how we become Krishna conscious, which are the pious activities and which are the impious activities. Those are describing in these shlokas. Uh, Hare Krishna Dandat Pranam. Prabhuji will tell you in detail. Hare Krishna Dandat Pranam. Pancha kalpatarubecha krupa sindhube evacha patitanam pa.
Hare Krishna. So, after having understood one of the important topics about pure devotional service or Shuddha Bhakti, we have now moved to the next chapter, wherein we are trying to understand in detail further advances. And today's shlokas are all the more important as they are making us eligible to understand about the Vedic path. So Krishna is saying that the persons who are unfit for all the three forms of yoga, it could be karma, jnana, and bhakti yoga. So, who are such persons? They are the ones who are inimical to Krishna. They are the ones who are attached to sense gratification. They are the ones who are dominated by fruitive activities aimed at fulfillment of material desires. So, this particular chapter is going to now further explain the faults in terms of place, time, substance, and beneficiary of actions. So these particular first 5 shlokas which we have taken up, they are the ones who are giving us the introduction to this very important topic. So the way to study this particular topic is to understand what are their qualities, what are their results, and try to avoid them in our day-to-day life. So what it means is that we should not be moved by material senses. We should not be cultivating any kind of sense gratification, and we should try to overcome the continual cycle of material existence. So we'll hear a lot of times that, okay, these are pious activities. You should be doing the pious activities. So if you have started doing pious activities and we are maintaining steadiness in our position, then that is actual peace. But the moment we deviate from our position, then it is impiety. So that is how we have to understand what is piousness and what is impiousness. So Krishna tells Uddhava that if one wants to understand what is proper in life, then we have to evaluate within a particular category. So it's always apple to apple comparison. That is what we say in the corporate world. So if you are trying to understand what is the growth, it should not be on the amount. It should be a percentage that gets compared. So similarly, if you are understanding and analyzing religious principles, then we must consider purity and impurity. And similarly, ordinary dealings, they have to distinguish between good and bad. So we have to ensure that our survival must recognize what is auspicious and inauspicious. And over and above everything, we have to come to the position that everything is made of the 5 basic elements. So whatever and why, wherever we try to do anything, Shuddhi, Ashuddhi, Vidyete, it has to be on this basis. So any sane person who is able to accept this practical and immediate necessity of material discrimination, he must ultimately come to the transcendental stage of Krishna consciousness. Because there, the life is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge. So when Krishna is giving these teachings to Uddhava, slowly Krishna is clarifying his own eternal transcendental position beyond whatever material good and evil that we can ever think of. And that is why Lochan Das Thakur says, Param Karuna Pahu Tui Jana Nitaya Gaura Chand Ramachandra, Sab Avatar Sara Shiromani, Kevala Anand Kanda. And we are so lucky that we are going to be celebrating the appearance day of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu on the coming 25th of March, which is the Purnima, Gaur Purnima festival. So let us try to make ourselves eligible to understand these aspects and go back home, back to Godhead successfully. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.